Alrighty, last but not least, we have happiness. That's chapter 10. So let's start in on number 19. So this pertains to the upward and downward sloping curves that Nozick discusses on pages 99 through 102. If you look at the middle of page 102, that's when he gets the conclusion of the thought experiment that he starts on the bottom of 99 into 100. So Nozick wants us to imagine two lives that are represented by two different lines, a continuously upward sloping line and a continuously downward sloping line. You can imagine these plotted on a graph, and these are supposed to represent the amount of happiness in one's life over time, where one life contains a continuous increase in happiness going up, the other life contains a continuous decrease in happiness going down. But, and this is the most important part, when you add it all up, the amount of happiness in the two lives is exactly equal. Now this might be an idealization, and yes, so it is, but Nozick wants to illustrate a certain point through this idealization of two lives that have exactly the same amount of happiness in them, but where one is always diminishing and one is always increasing. So, what point is he trying to illustrate? Now, we will get to this I'll get to that conclusion right now. I would say this, though. If you think closely about it, there's really a lot of interesting things that go into asking this question, rather answering, I should say. Which of these two lives would you prefer? Keeping in mind they have exactly the same total amount of happiness in them. The only difference is that one goes from the bottom to totally ever-increasing happiness. The other, again, goes from the top to ever-decreasing happiness. But when you add it all up, it's exactly the same. So, of these two lives, which of the two would you prefer? There's a lot of interesting issues that might go into making that decision. But Nozick's real point is just this. You'll have a preference. No matter whether it's the first life or the second life, everybody's going to prefer one or the other. Or so he pretty much assumes, and seems to be right. When I do this in class, most people seem to go from the life of ever-increasing happiness. But that's really not the point, so much which one you would prefer. Nozick wants to make a point simply by the mere fact that you have a preference. That you would prefer one of these two lives to the other illustrates and roughly proves, in a loose manner of speaking, the point on 102, that we would all agree with this. Because we prefer one of these lives to the other, quote, we are not empty containers or buckets to be stuffed with good things. Such a bucket has no appropriate structure within, and we care about how our experiences are fit together or contoured over time. So that's the main point that Nozick wants to make about happiness. He thinks this is an objective truth about happiness that basically everybody would agree with, at least so long as you have a preference between those two lives. Okay, on to the next. This is a relatively minor point here about pleasure. Nozick on page 103 defines pleasure as something that is valued because of its own felt qualities. There's a lot of things that we value, education, money, but we don't value them because of how they feel. Pleasure is unique amongst things that we value by being valued precisely for how it feels. That's what a pleasure is. Okay, so if you were curious about that, there you go. Relatively minor point. Here we go, 21, the experience machine. Some of you have probably seen The Matrix. I have not, but I've heard the basic line. This might be kind of similar to this, but it is a little different. So here's the idea here. We have another thought experiment, which is an idealization, a hypothetical situation, but it's intended to draw our attention to a certain specific point. So here is the idealization, the thought experiment, which we're going to call the experience machine. It's on page 104. So the idea here is this, that just imagine, for the sake of argument, that we were able to step into a machine that produced in our consciousness any stream of experiences that we wanted. And we were the ones that programmed the exact experiences that we will have inside the machine. And these experiences are completely realistic, vivid, and as lifelike as if we were doing these things in real life. So if you wanted to climb Mount Everest and you went into the experience machine and you programmed that experience, you would have the exact experience from the inside of what it would be like to climb Mount Everest. Of course, you wouldn't have really done it, but from the inside, your experience would be completely identical, and this is important, you would not know that it was just a produced experience and not a real one. So, Nozick asks the following question. Given this setup that you can program whatever experiences you want, they're totally vivid and lifelike, and you won't know that they're fake, meaning that they're not connected to what's really happening, would you enter an experience machine for the rest of your life? Clearly enough, we would experiment with it for a day, an hour, a week, maybe even a month. But his question is, would you go in for a lifetime? The question here really is, well, what could possibly be missing of what we want from our life? From the inside, we will be living the most perfect possible life. I mean, you get to program exactly what's going on inside of you, so you can make the most perfect stream of experiences possible. And from the inside, you won't know that they're not real. So what could possibly be missing? Why wouldn't anybody go into this machine? Not only for a day, but for a whole life. There's nothing that could be missing, at least as viewed from the inside. So that's the kind of the challenge here. And he asks you, well, would you go in? Most people say no. So the question is, well, why not? The conclusion that Nozick draws, and this is getting to 23, is that, well, we clearly care about more than just how things feel from the inside. Most of us think of happiness or what we want as just what it's like to be going through those things on the inside. But if that were all we cared about, we would go into the experience machine. Because from that perspective, nothing's missing from the inside. So the fact that we wouldn't go into the experience machine shows that something else matters to us above and beyond how things feel from the inside. In particular, we want our positive experiences to be connected to reality. We want to be importantly connected to reality, and that matters as much, if not more, than how we're feeling on the inside, is the extent to which our feelings are connected to reality and the extent to which we and our lives are connected to reality. So reality matters. And that seems to be an unarguable conclusion from this experience machine thought experiment. Okay. So Nozick also talks about 3 different forms of happiness, and those are discussed on page 108. The first one is being happy now, which is kind of easy to come by, and I would say doesn't run very deep. If you're an A's fan, that's the Oakland Athletics, and the A's win, you might be happy now. But that certainly doesn't mean that you have a happy life or that you're satisfied and fulfilled in your life. And nothing big has been brought to you by the fact that you're happy now. So anything good that's going on can make you happy now. The second one is feeling that your life is good now, and this is a feeling of completion, as though there is nothing missing from your life as it stands at the moment. Now, importantly, it's just feeling that way. It's not actually things being that way. So we can have those feelings of completeness. God, there's just really nothing missing right now, just by muting out and ignoring everything that really is missing. So that's not really, I think, the happiness that we want. The third form of happiness seems to be what we're really after, which is being satisfied with your life as a whole. And that's what I describe in the little handout, The Logic of Happiness. I'm basically elaborating what I take to be Nozick's main points in the rest of the chapter, which develop this third form of happiness, which I think is what we mean by real happiness. And The Logic of Happiness handout is basically my take on what that amounts to. Okay, so that's just a brief discussion of happiness, and that'll about wrap it up. Be well.